We can function with one kidney, and that's why, thankfully, incredibly, living kidney donors exist. So we can get by with one kidney, and that one functioning kidney can get us through life on its own, independently, totally fine. And that's why the medical system, medical companies, transplant clinics, why they are able to take those kidneys from living donors, because we know very confidently that somebody with a functioning kidney can manage with one.
Welcome back to Discovering Nutrition with Cronometer. I'm your host and community marketing manager, Eliisa. Today we're diving into a topic that's often overlooked but incredibly important: kidney health. Chronic kidney disease affects millions worldwide, and nutrition plays a critical role in managing it. Before this conversation, I didn't know much about CKD, but after learning from today's guest, I was truly fascinated by just how much our diet impacts kidney function. I'm joined by Jen Hernandez, a renal dietitian and founder of Plant-Powered Kidneys. She's dedicated her career to helping people navigate CKD through science-backed, plant-based nutrition. She's the reason I now understand so much about kidney health, and I can't wait to share her expertise with you. As always, this podcast is for general purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including getting medical advice. The use of information from this podcast is at the user's own risk and is not to be substituted for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All right, let's get into it. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I've been excited about this one. I feel like it's been in my calendar for a while, and I'm really looking forward to it because you know what? I know absolutely nothing about this subject. So most of the time.
I'm really grateful that you asked me to be a part of it because I am pretty big on this subject and I love talking about it. So it's great.
I think it's great. Our content for the month of November is kind of centered around chronic disease. And so when we were thinking, we researched what a lot of people struggle with. And I was really surprised that there's so many people that are struggling with chronic kidney disease. Like I had no idea, it's interesting to me because usually you know of somebody, you know what I mean? With like cancer and stuff, I have so many examples of people in my life who have had cancer, but this is just one that I haven't really heard about. So I'm coming at it from a very newbie perspective, but excited to dive in.
Well, great. Yeah. I also don't have like familial connections with CKD, but having worked in dialysis and that being like such a big part of my background, I know now a lot of people. And I feel like once I saw it and like once it kind of came out in front of my face, then it was like I couldn't not see it. And it was just, even like walking down the street and you see somebody with a bump on their arm and you're like, oh, they have a fistula, they're on dialysis, and like just things that like I historically never would have thought of, but then it just sticks out.
Maybe that will happen with me now because when I was doing research on this subject, I didn't want to do too much because I kind of was hoping that we could educate people from the ground up on this podcast. But I read through some of the success stories on your website and you're making a huge impact. Like this is such a life-changing thing for people. And I really didn't understand the magnitude of what you're doing for them until I read some of the reviews. And with Cronometer, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Cronometer at all.
Yeah, I use it with all my clients. I recommend it.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
My coworker, Emily, she's the content marketing manager, made this appointment. And I assume that she found you somewhere, but I never want to bank on that. But I do all of our app reviews as well. I respond to all of them. And I do see a lot of people that are like, this helped me, manage my kidney disease. And I was like, whoa, like people are using us for weight loss, but then people are using us for things that are really affecting their health. So I'd love to dive in. We've already dipped our toe in, but really excited to have you here, Jen. And if you could just give me a little bit of a background about who you are and how you got into working with kidney disease clients.
Sure. Well, my full name is Jen Hernandez, and my background is I am a registered dietitian, and I'm also board certified in renal nutrition. And what that means is I did the undergrad work and I took my RD exam to become a dietitian. And then I did another 2,000 hours with kidney patients and then took another RD exam centralized around renal nutrition. And so I passed that second exam. So now I can also add that board certified renal onto my credentials. And this has been something that has been part of the majority of my dietetic career. I've been a dietitian for over 10 years now, and literally almost all of that time has been some form of kidney disease, whether it was within the hospitals or long-term care. But the majority of it, I started working in dialysis, and that was kind of like where I really dove headfirst into learning about chronic kidney disease, and particularly end-stage kidney disease. I learned about how to address a renal diet from an end-stage kidney disease standpoint, which historically the renal diet used to just be thought of as like just one renal diet, but now there's multiple types of renal diets. It comes down to like what is causing the kidney disease and then where a person is at in their stages of kidney disease. And so I started in the dialysis area to help people with kidney failure learn how to take care of themselves so that they had better dialysis treatments and they felt better throughout their days on and off treatment and were well nourished. But it was after being in that environment for a few years where I started to basically get this pull to go back into some kind of preventive care. I've always been interested in preventive care, but I really wanted to do something to help people not be on dialysis, because it broke my heart when I had a new patient start and they would say like, I wish I did something different. I wish I made a better choice with some of my diet so I didn't have to end up here now. Because a lot of people are told once they have kidney disease that it's just an automatic, like a tunnel vision, like at the end of the tunnel is dialysis and there's no turns, there's no options. This is the path you were destined for. And I wanted to help people see that that's not the case. So that was back in around 2018 where I started Plant-Powered Kidneys, and I started just making content on Instagram and Facebook. I created my website. I started creating things to help educate people and help them better understand nutrition and how it's intended to help them. And that's what Plant-Powered Kidneys has become today. I do this full time, working with kidney patients to help them delay or even entirely avoid dialysis for the rest of their lives just by making nutrition, diet, lifestyle changes. So yeah, that's kind of like the long short of it, of how I kind of got to Plant-Powered Kidneys and what I do. And I only work with kidney patients now. Everything I do is always focused around them. And it's an incredible honor. I always tell my students and my clients, like, it's just such an honor that somebody will put their faith in me to help them with this, because it is scary and it's a chronic illness. It's a lifetime diagnosis. It's not going away. It's just such an honor that somebody puts their faith in me to help guide them and to help support them in any capacity that I'm able to.
Yeah, I feel very similar, obviously on like a different scale, but being the community manager at Cronometer, I get to have a front row seat to the lives that we're changing. And it's something I never take for granted. And I'm always so appreciative when people share their stories and that kind of thing, because it's like, yeah, what my job is, and I'm sure you feel this 100-fold, is actually helping people. You know, like people are coming to you, they're coming to Cronometer because they want to make a change in health, and watching people be successful doing that is so impactful and rewarding. And honestly, it makes me, I think, take better care of myself, honestly, too, a little bit, you know, like I get inspired by our users. So I did mention I know absolutely nothing about chronic kidney disease, and I am a complete newbie. So if you could help us and our listeners understand, basically, I'm curious at the base level, like what is the main function of our kidneys and why is it important for them to be healthy? I don't really know a lot about this organ.
You know, it's interesting, like our lungs, we're very aware of our lungs. We're very aware of our heart. We're very aware of our brain. We're very aware of other organs that are actively functioning, and we can feel that. The kidneys are actively working, and we know they're actively working when we don't feel them. When we don't feel anything, when we feel fine, when we feel good, then our kidneys are working. The kidneys have several different roles in the body, and they're all very, very important. They have to do with balancing our hormones, creating hormones. They have to do with balancing our blood pH. They have to be a part of our blood pressure control. They help filter and eliminate waste from the body. They help keep us hydrated and keep our electrolytes within balance. So the kidneys do a lot for our body. It's kind of this gatekeeper at the end of our digestion, at the end of everything our body is doing. The kidneys deciding, okay, do you stay or do you go? Is this something that we need to hold on to? Is this something that we need to get rid of? Beyond the other things like helping to create red blood cells. And then those red blood cells deliver oxygen to the body. So like there's a lot of very intricate things that the kidneys are doing that we're not always aware of. But we don't look at it as just like one certain thing that they are responsible for. We look at all these different things that the kidneys do. And when somebody has chronic kidney disease, all of these tasks get downgraded and the kidneys are losing function. They're losing that capability of doing all of these things. And that's where it can be really difficult for somebody with chronic kidney disease when they're feeling tired, they're feeling maybe hungry, or in some cases, they're not feeling hungry at all. They're losing their appetite. They're having uncontrolled blood pressure. They are experiencing pain and just a lot of problems. It's difficult to pinpoint in some cases, especially for something like fatigue. You know, that's such a big symptom and we can't just like pinpoint it on one thing necessarily, but that is really common with kidney patients that they are feeling fatigued because in part that red blood cell production decreasing, the oxygen not getting to our organs, including our brain, you know, all of, and our heart and everything, that can be very much a problem. So those are some of the things I think that are really important to know about kidney disease is how much it affects so many different parts of our systems, our different systems that we don't realize.
I honestly had no idea, which I feel like I should be more aware because it's interesting when you said it, I didn't really think about it. But when you said, like, I am aware of what my lungs can do and I do feel, you know, like on a run, I'm like, oh, I'm breathing really hard. And obviously I'm aware of my heart and stuff, but it's something that maybe you don't pay attention to unless you have to pay attention to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious. I hope this isn't a really stupid question, but we can donate a kidney. So we only need one. Are they always functioning similarly, or can like one be a strong kidney and one is less? Like, how does that work? How can we give them away?
We can function with one kidney, and that's why, thankfully, incredibly, living kidney donors exist. So we can get by with one kidney, and that one functioning kidney can get us through life on its own, independently, totally fine. And that's why the medical system, medical companies, transplant clinics, why they are able to take those kidneys from living donors, because we know very confidently that somebody with a functioning kidney can manage with one. So yeah, that very much is totally fine. And there can be maybe differences between the different kidney function between two kidneys. For example, somebody who has polycystic kidney disease, they might have one kidney that has more cysts, and these cysts that grow, it's kind of like scar tissue, that they're fluid filled sacs, but it's not working. So basically it's this kind of like dead weight that's taking over what the kidney's active function should be. And with polycystic kidney disease, over time, those cysts can get larger and larger and take over more of that kidney space, which decreases the kidney function. So there can be a little bit of fluctuation between two kidneys, but you don't measure your kidney function, which you look at the GFR, glomerular filtration rate, from a blood test. Yeah, try saying that like 5 times.
I was like, whoa, impressive.
I always have to pause myself. I'm like, okay, say it out. But yeah, they look at the GFR for both kidneys. It's kind of like a cumulative value. They don't look at it from the individual kidneys.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, my brain is exploding. It's on fire with questions right now. What are some of the risk factors that are associated with chronic kidney disease? Is this something that is hereditary? Is this mostly lifestyle? Like, what are your thoughts about how people are diagnosed?
Well, it's honestly kind of a hodgepodge of potential risks. There are, of course, genetic factors. So if you have a family history of kidney disease, if you have a relative that has been on dialysis or is on dialysis, if they're like an immediate blood relative, then that increases your risk of kidney disease, and very important to tell your doctor about so they can be monitoring your kidney function as well. There's also other factors. The two top causes of chronic kidney disease are high blood sugars, aka diabetes, and then high blood pressure, aka hypertension. So blood pressure, blood sugars, both of those uncontrolled can lead to kidney problems. And the reason behind both of these is that, one, the blood sugars, those higher amounts of sugars are, again, getting filtered through the kidneys And the sugar is a large molecule that can do damage to this very, very fine filter that is within the kidney. And so high blood sugars for a long period it wouldn't be just like one period of high blood sugars. This would be like years of high blood sugars that this can happen. So over time, a lot of high blood sugars, years and years of this can cause kidney damage, breaking those very, very fine kidney filters. And then on the other side, the high blood pressure, this is like basically putting your thumb over a garden hose and you're just like increasing that pressure straight through the kidneys, again, into those very fine, delicate filter systems that the kidneys hold. So those are the top two causes, and they can be, for the most part, they can be managed and controlled from diet, from medication, from lifestyle. There's a lot of opportunities to help take care of both of those things to help reduce that risk for kidney disease. Or if it does lead to kidney disease, there are still things to do to help control these multiple conditions that can happen. But there's also other problems that can create chronic kidney disease. Like if you overuse NSAIDs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, if you overuse those, yeah. Yeah. And I have had clients who have had that be the cause of their kidney disease, just this high use of NSAIDs. So be careful with those kinds of medications. Excessive drinking, smoking, some of those like kind of more common problems that we know that cause other health conditions, they also can cause kidney disease too. Heart disease is another one that can cause kidney problems. And then age. Usually chronic kidney disease is affecting older people more than younger people, unless it's something genetic, hereditary that could be addressed at a younger age. But usually older people are at higher risk of developing chronic kidney disease as well.
Is there an age that we see that the kidney has just stopped functioning as well?
It's not like a stop necessarily, but we do find that around 65 and older, so basically senior citizens are at a higher risk of it. And also the kidneys, we're kind of like a car, like, the engine wears down eventually, motor runs down, all these things kind of run down over time. So there is some expected decline with age as we get older for our kidney function, but it doesn't automatically mean that when you hit 65 or older, it doesn't mean you're automatically going to have kidney disease. It just means that your GFR might be measuring a little bit lower. And there is an age-related decline that's expected. But then there's chronic kidney disease with a further decline, like more so than what's expected.
Interesting. Like you said, I interviewed a gastroenterologist and her and I were talking because I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. And so I've always been like, oh, I'm probably like my organs are probably happy. But then her and I were talking about NSAIDs because I get migraines and have taken Advil for a very long time. And she made me brutally aware of what that can do. So I'm not surprised that it also would affect kidneys. I've tried since my episode with her, Dr. Liz Cruz, she was amazing, to have less, but now you're reiterating that message. So maybe people who are listening that have also consumed a lot of Advil or NSAIDs, maybe take a step back, because I thought I was doing everything right, but
right. Yeah. And you would think too, for like an over-the-counter medication, like what harm is this going to be? Like this is something I can get without a prescription. How is it bad? And it is the emphasis of like chronic use. Like one of my former patients, she was doing like 2 or 3 per day for like years. And so it was a lot for a long period of time. But even so, like in your case and other people, you can let your doctor know about that and just say like, now I'm thinking about my kidneys, or you can look at your past blood work, because there's a good chance that the GFR, it's included in the CMP, your comprehensive metabolic profile. That's typically what people get annually. If you go to your physical and you just get a checkup from the doctor, they usually get a CMP for you, and the GFR is in there. And your creatinine, which is another blood, that's a natural waste that our body makes, but that's one of the wastes that the kidneys are responsible for. So you can look at some of those labs and just talk with your doctor and say, hey, now that this has come to my attention, I would like to kind of do a quick review to see how my kidneys are doing with this, and if there's anything I should be paying attention to moving forward.
That's a perfect segue into my next question. I was going to ask you how people know that their kidneys are functioning well. Basically, that just they're not having any kind of symptoms, or should people be getting regular blood work to determine that they actually are functioning well?
Well, kidney disease, chronic kidney failure, is known as a silent killer because there is no symptoms. In fact, somebody can lose 90% of their kidney function, which means they would qualify for dialysis treatments before even knowing something was wrong. So if you're feeling really, really sick, it's definitely important to get that checked out, especially again, if you have a family history or if you have those high risk factors in your life, that's definitely important to take a look at. But otherwise, yeah, it is just consistent, proactive care. So going to your annual physical, making sure that you go line by line with your labs. And I know not all doctors have the time for that. So maybe doing it ahead by yourself and then preparing and writing questions for your appointment. There are things that you can do to like make the most of that short time that you have with your doctor. And a lot of doctors now have their electronic health records with like a message portal. And that's something that my clients that I tell them, they message me all the time. It's like, just send me a message anytime I can help you. Anytime you have a question, drop it over. I don't want you to like try to tuck it away and then forget it, right? Because that's so easy for us to do. So it is really all about being proactive and focusing on consistent preventive care. So making that appointment in your calendar. And I know, doctor's appointments, getting blood work and everything, no one's ever excited for it. It's not like a fun thing. No one's like grinning ear to ear when they're calling up the office or booking that appointment. But I can tell you that if you know what you are preventing, which is, an example of a dialysis patient, they're getting 4-hour dialysis treatments 3 to 4 times a week. And I mean, imagine like sitting in a chair, not being able to just get up for 4 hours. Like it's very, very difficult. I mean, of course they can, if they need to go to the bathroom, they can be disconnected and go to the bathroom, but that cuts away that treatment time. And those treatment times, the medical field is trying to figure out the best balance between giving a good quality of life, i.e. not tying somebody to a chair 24 hours a day, but then also making sure they do take care of the wastes that are building up. So trying to find this balance of like, how can we keep them well, but not mentally punish them? So again, thinking about, okay, you know what, if I'm just going to go get my blood drawn like once or twice a year, and I'm going to go to a doctor's office once or twice a year, that definitely beats 12 hours a week, 16 hours a week sitting in a chair, or, it's a lot. And so I know the preventive stuff kind of can feel draining, but if you think about what you're preventing, I think it's a lot more motivating.
Yeah, that's kind of where I've landed too, and where I see a lot of our users now landing is there is this prevalence of preventative care, which I'm really excited about, because people are always like, why do you track your nutrition every day? And I'm like, it's because I want to be 80 and healthy. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing it for the future. But when you put it into context like that, I recently got blood work done and my doctor's like, I haven't seen you in 9 years. And I'm like, whoa, okay, that's a long time. But I was really happy, like everything was fine, but I was really happy that I had a baseline, and I think that's important. So maybe like everything's fine now, but maybe if I went next year, because I'm going to heed your advice and I'm going to make it an annual thing, Jen, then if something was different, it's always just good to have something to compare to, you know what I mean? So I think that is important. And you're right, like it is a hassle to go and do that, but what is more of a hassle? Like having an issue 10 years later that you said locks you in a chair for 12 hours a week. That's a lot. So
yeah, I had my labs drawn. I get mine drawn every 6 months, and I had a low vitamin D level. And so I needed to supplement. I needed to correct that. And I corrected that. And then my doctor was like, okay, great. Like, I'll see you in 12 months. And I was like, actually, like, I'm titrating my vitamin D. I would like to keep a little bit of a closer eye on it. So can we do 6 months? And she was like, wow, like nobody ever asked to see me more. So, but it's something I recommend to my clients and my students. Like anytime you want to take that proactive measure, like hopefully you have a doctor that is agreeable to help keep an eye on things. And like, I don't think it's good to be too hyper focused. And that is something for people with kidney disease that they can get really, really wrapped up into like checking labs all the time. But it's really more important what you're doing in between those lab checks rather than the lab checks themselves. So it's good to have a healthcare professional that has your back and is supportive of the things that you want to do.
my physician now is incredible. And if I have a question, she will answer it and she never like dismisses, you know, like my age, for example, because before I'd seen people, I'm like, oh, you're young, you're fine. And you know, to have a physician that's like, no, like she's asking for this for a reason. It is a little bit different. I'm in Canada, so we have free healthcare. So maybe there is a little bit of a difference there, but yeah, shout out to my doctor, Dr. Wild. She's amazing. Are there any early warning signs for kidney disease? You mentioned obviously that there was some that people might dismiss, like fatigue. Are there other things that people like, whoa, maybe I should get checked out?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of them are going to be pretty broad and not something that you'd be like, oh, I know for sure it's my kidneys. Like, yeah, let me get right on that. But yes, 100% the fatigue is definitely one thing. If you do happen to track your blood sugars or your blood pressure and you're noticing they're kind of getting even more funky, they're getting higher, or you're having like extreme highs and lows with your blood sugars, anything that's kind of changing, that could be important. Other signs, especially later CKD, would be like a lack of appetite, nausea, vomiting, your body basically saying like, I cannot take in more nutrients. I'm trying to take care of what's going on. So if you're losing your appetite as a dietitian, that's a big red flag for me that something is going on. So some of those things can be important factors to know about, but ultimately it really does have to go down to the going to a physician, urgent care, the ER, whatever it is, you know, going to a doctor and getting that assessed so they can figure out what more is going on. Because there's not anything. I mean, even some people say that they can feel like kidney pain, like in their lower back, which is where your kidneys are. They might feel pain with their kidneys, and that might be related to something like a kidney stone, or it could be pain with the kidneys. And that's something else that you might experience. But from what I've heard with clients, that's not a typical experience. It's not, they don't usually feel that kind of pain. It's just more so overall feeling drained. And another thing is when I'm asking my patients, when I'm just checking in with them, like, hey, how are you doing? And then they say good, but then like later they're like, I'm fine. To me, I hear good and fine. And like, fine isn't good. Like fine to me sounds like I'm getting by, I'm tolerating, I'm dealing, like I'm managing. And that's a kind of an early trigger to me to be like, okay, like what's going on? And I ask my patients, I give them like scaling questions, like rate your energy, rate your appetite, rate your mood, rate your stress levels, like let me know how things are, because doing kind of those more consistent check-ins can be really helpful to catch something. But if you're going, like if you felt good and now you feel fine, then maybe that's worth going to the doctor and checking with the doctor about some things.
Because it is possible to feel vital. So do not accept fine. So if you could walk me through chronic kidney disease, again, I know nothing. Is there 4 stages?
There's 5.
Okay. See, already wrong. Wrong.
So it could be, we could say technically there's 4 plus. So there's chronic kidney disease stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then there's chronic kidney disease stage 5, AKA end stage kidney failure. So it still is a stage of kidney disease, but now a lot of the medical professionals are referring to stage 5 CKD as end stage kidney failure.
You really got me off the hook there, Jen. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so if you could walk me through what each stage is and what that looks like for people.
Sure. So there are different numbers related to the different stages of chronic kidney disease. So we have stage 1, and that means a GFR, your glomerular filtration rate, your GFR is 90 or above. And typically this is considered a normal kidney function. So in a lot of lab results, you might just see GFR greater than 90. And like, that's great. You're not staged with any kidney problems. However, there is, with stage 1, it's an indication that there's some type of damage. And that's where a urinalysis will come into play, or maybe a biopsy. There's something else going on. But basically stage 1 is saying there's plenty of kidney function, but there's some type of damage present, whether it's protein leaking in the urine or something, again, that comes up on a biopsy or a scan. There's something else going on. Now, stage 2 is a GFR from 60 to 89. And we can think of these numbers kind of like percentages. So think like 60% to 89% of kidney function. Then we have stage 3, which is technically broken into 2 stages. There's stage 3A and 3B. And 3A is GFR 45 to 59, and 3B is 30 to 44. I will not test you on these numbers later. I always need them like for a reminder for myself too. There is an easy way to think of them being broken up. So those are stages 3. So the whole stage 3 is from 30 to 59, and it's just cut in half for A and B. Stage 4 is a GFR from 15 to 29%. And then stage 5, AKA end stage kidney failure, is under 15%. So those are the 5 different stages. And then oftentimes what a clinician will do when they are looking at kidney function, number one, only your doctor can tell you that you have any type of kidney disease or kidney damage. Number 2, it comes from multiple tests. So even if you do have a GFR that's a little low, it has to be confirmed. It has to be duplicated in order for it to be for sure diagnosed kidney damage or kidney disease. So, don't worry if you see one number that's a little bit low, because our GFR is also very affected by hydration. So if you're dehydrated, it might be just falsely low, which can be really common before you're getting lab draws, especially if you're fasting. You may not be drinking enough fluids. So those are the GFRs for the different stages. And then there's also, they look at the protein in the urine, and there's anywhere from a normal to mild protein leaking, which is basically under 30 milligrams per gram measurement in urinalysis. There's moderate, which is 3 to 300 milligrams per gram. And then there's over 300 milligrams per gram of protein leaking in the urine. And this is coming from a urinalysis. The urinalysis is done because, again, our kidneys are getting rid of wastes. So we're measuring the urine, which is a collection of those waste products. And we want to see what's going on there. Protein is not typically found in the urine. It's a very big molecule. It should not be getting through those fine kidney filters. And so if there's protein in there, that's a sign that there's some type of damage that the protein is able to get through. And if there's a lot of protein, then that's an indication that there's a lot of damage, there's inflammation, there are things going on. Basically think of it like a colander, and you're washing blueberries and there's extra holes in the colander and the blueberries are just falling out in the bottom. Like, that's not how it's supposed to be. Blueberries stay in, the water comes through. So that's another way to think of it.
That's a very clear visual, and I appreciate that. Can people go from stage 3 to stage 2, or is it when you're going through the stages, it's just a natural progression? Like, can we come back from damage?
So it used to be, again, like this tunnel vision idea of like, it's just a matter of time. You're going to hit these markers and you're destined for dialysis. You're destined for stage 5. But I can tell you from my own experience with my clients, and when I say my own, I mean me as the clinician working with people with kidney disease, I have seen it time and time again that we have been able to increase their GFR, increase their kidney function in order to get from a stage. I have somebody who went from a stage 5 to a stage 4. I've had several people go from some kind of stage 3 area to stage 2 or stage 1. I've had people go from stage 4 to 2, like all over the place. They've been able to improve their filtration rate. Now, I will add that it's not a matter of improving that damage, because once that damage happens to the kidney, like, that's irreversible. But what we're able to do is better care for the kidney and make sure that we're not overloading it with a lot of waste products that the kidneys then have to deal with. So making these dietary changes that just alleviates that pressure and giving more nutrients that support the kidneys, that support our overall health, so that the kidneys can continue to do what they need to do. So there will be some doctors who say like, no, there's no such thing as it. And the diagnosis itself, like as a dietitian, I do not diagnose my patients with any type of kidney disease stage, but we go off of the doctor's notes. And when the doctor says, like, I just had a student who went from stage 4 to stage 3, and the doctor wrote, was stage 4, now stage 3. So it's very much possible.
That's hopeful. I like that the damage is not irreparable, but that there is room that you can improve your GFR numbers. You're already teaching me. You're already teaching me things. At what stage do people require dialysis? Is that stage 5?
Yeah. So stage 5 is when somebody qualifies for dialysis. In some cases, people in stage 4 will probably have those conversations, like preparing, and the doctor. And I get a lot of people telling me like, oh, my doctor only talks about dialysis. Like, I'm stage 4. My doctor only talks about starting dialysis, or I'm stage 5. My doctor just keeps pushing me to be on dialysis. that's their job. Like medically, they're protecting themselves because that's the medical side of things. And it would be bad if they didn't tell you what your options were, which include dialysis or transplant. And so they are going to continue to bring that up because it's their responsibility to continue to ask you, to continue to check in with you and say, is this something that you want right now? It is no longer, it used to be that when you were a stage 5 GFR under 15 or under 10, then you had to start dialysis. Like it was just like, this is it. Like this is what you do. But now the medical field, with the guidelines that are coming out and the recommendations, that these international guidelines, they're saying it's not a mandatory you have to start. It's a choice. And it's always supposed to be the patient's choice if and when they want to start dialysis. Now, I painted a pretty like bleak picture earlier about dialysis, but I will say that dialysis is here as a life-saving treatment. It is very much something that can help people live longer compared to not being able to have that. So it is a life-saving treatment. It is very scary because it is such a medically heavy, intense type of therapy, but it is life-saving. So I will say that. And whenever I do have somebody, especially like my stage 4, stage 5 patients, it's something that I don't ask in the way that like doctors do, but I will say like, you know, hey, I've worked in dialysis for several years. And so if you have questions about what a dialysis diet looks like compared to your CKD diet, like we can talk about that because I want everybody to be very informed of whatever choice they make. It's just another type of healthcare choice that they should be making for themselves. You know, and the last thing we want is somebody to get really, really sick and end up in the ER and have to start emergency dialysis that they had no idea what was going on. Because I've had quite a few patients in dialysis like that too, that they just didn't realize it. And all of a sudden they wake up with a catheter sticking out of their neck because they needed emergency dialysis. So I think it's much better to be informed than to risk waking up like that.
I agree. Information is power. What is dialysis exactly? Like, I'm not familiar with that. You have painted a little bit of a picture, but obviously a lot of people do rely on this. What does it look like? What does it do?
So basically it's replacing what the kidney was supposed to be doing, which is removing waste and toxins from the body. There's basically 2 different types of dialysis. There is hemodialysis. So hemo meaning blood. It is cleaning the blood. So basically someone is connected with a fistula, a graft. They'll have some type of connection where they have their blood that's taken out and cycled through a big machine. It has its own filter, which is basically replicating or replacing the kidney's filter. So the blood goes through there, gets cleaned out, and gets put back into the body. And it's just this constant cycling of the blood going out, coming back through for the 4-ish hours.
Is it all of your blood?
Not like at once. It's like, think of it like if you were donating blood or getting your blood drawn. It's like you have one tube that the blood is coming out, and then you have another connection that the blood is coming and returning back to the body.
Does it do your whole, like the whole volume of blood, or is it just like a portion of, do you know?
We have about like 180 liters of blood, I believe. And I'd have to be doing the math because this kind of stuff is from like way back when for dialysis for me. I don't believe it's covering everything, but it's trying to get as much of the waste as possible. And so there are blood tests that are done before and after dialysis to measure those, how much waste was there present beforehand and how much waste remains. And there are like thresholds in these calculations to say, as long as this much has been cleared, then we're good. Then we know that we're good. But I mean, you know, imagining like our kidneys are working 24/7, like never taking a break, always working. And dialysis is only working when someone is connected to the machine.
Yeah.
So it's trying to do literally 48 hours because typically people go 3 times a week. So it would be like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So, you know, you get your blood cleaned for 4 hours Monday morning, but then you go the rest of Monday and then the rest of Tuesday, and then you go back Wednesday to get your blood cleaned again. So it's not going to be able to take care of everything in those 4 hours for that 48-hour period of time.
That's really intense.
It is
really intense. That I had no idea. That's really a lot.
It is.
You know, even just to mentally process that, you know, you're having to get your blood basically like cleaned, I think my heart goes out to people that are going through dialysis. That sounds really challenging.
Yeah. Well, there is another one that doesn't have to do with the blood directly. And that one is known as peritoneal dialysis. And that's where you have a tube inserted into your abdomen. And they give you basically it's a big bag of solution, and you put the solution through the tube into your abdomen cavity. And this solution is it's called peritoneal dialysis because they use the peritoneal cavity. And that fluid is able to pull the wastes through into the solution. And then that solution is then dumped out. It's released. And then you do these PD, they're called exchanges. So like one bag would be for a certain number of hours. Or there's some people that do PD overnight. So they just connect themselves at night and they have a machine that has the bags that they need. And then it just dialyzes them while they sleep. And so it takes care of it that way. There's also kind of a fraction of the hemodialysis. There's home hemodialysis, and that's where somebody gets their own dialysis machine. It's a smaller, different type of machine that they can have at home. And instead of dialyzing 3 times a week like they would in a dialysis clinic, they would dialyze like maybe 6 times a week at home, but for like shorter periods of time, like maybe 2 or 3 hours or so. But because they're getting more frequent, like smaller intervals of blood cleaning, it's a much gentler type of dialysis, even though it's through the blood. And this is something I worked with both home patients and in-center patients. And in America, we used to be in-center. Like that was the standard, is in-center dialysis. When somebody needs that dialysis, they get put in-center. But there's a bigger switch now to having people try to start with home dialysis because there's better outcomes. There's better quality of life. People are having better treatments. They have more diet flexibility from a dietitian standpoint. They are able to eat more and better foods. So there's a lot of benefits from the home dialysis side. And I remember thinking because I'm thinking home hemodialysis, I have to cannulate, I have to stick needles in myself. That's terrifying.
Yes.
But when I talked to patients about it, they were like, actually, now that I know how to do it, I won't let anybody else do it. Because the way that they told me, I'll never forget. One of the patients said, it's like tickling. You cannot tickle yourself, but somebody else can tickle you. And then you jerk away. You're just you're uncomfortable. You can touch that. You have a brain body connection that nobody else can replicate. And so when you learn to cannulate yourself, it's the least painful because you know exactly what's going on and you know exactly what you're feeling and somebody else is guessing. And so to me, that just blew my mind.
It's still a big undertaking though.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's still, this would be, I think about traveling or having a family, and there's just a ton of things you would have to consider that I've obviously been taking for granted. And I'm sure a lot of people that have functioning kidneys have as well. One of the things that is imperative to dive into is actually what you do specifically, Jen. So I would love, now that we have a better understanding of kidney disease, I feel like I'm much more educated. Thank you. I would love to know how you support people as a registered dietitian and what role nutrition plays in both preventing and helping treat the effects of chronic kidney disease.
As an entrepreneur, somebody who has their own practice and, kind of doing everything from my own bootstraps, I cover and I do a lot of things. So one of my favorite things is teaching people via social media. So sharing information online, whether it's giving them nutrition tips, giving them ideas of what they can do to enjoy more foods with kidney disease. We do a lot of that with our Instagram and our Facebook group. We have a lot of that available for people to just show them that there is a good, positive support system that is available to them. So I do a lot of that. I do writing, and we have a lot of blog articles on our website. So we do, again, just free content, free education for people to learn more about all the nuances with the renal diet, because there are a lot of fads. Right now in the general population, protein is having a moment. Everyone is so focused on protein. Kidney patients are focused on protein. They're focused on potassium. They're focused on sodium. They're focused on fluids. They're focused on magnesium. They're focused on carbohydrates and then fiber. There's so much in a renal diet because it's so some people with diabetes, some people with high blood pressure, some people with both on top of kidney disease. Like there's a lot to manage. And so we try to give a lot of information to help them put all of these pieces together and see how so many of these things overlap that actually still support kidney health. That's a big part of what we do. And then beyond that, I have Kidney Wellness Academy, and that's kind of my primary program that I have developed over years of working with these different patients. And it's really primarily targeted for people with stage 3, like earlier kidney disease, because in the medical field, when somebody has stage 3, their doctor 8-9 times out of 10 will say, there's nothing I can do for you and you don't need to worry about your diet. But doctors aren't nutrition experts. Like, I hate to say it, but they're not.
No, that's
and
fair.
So that's where I come in and say, actually, at stage 3, this is an incredibly powerful time for you. Then so many people don't even know about their kidney problems until stage 5 on dialysis. So this is a blessing in disguise. Like, I know it's tough and it's, no one's like, yay, kidney disease, great. But really, if you are told you have stage 3, like you have such an incredible, unique, special gift of an opportunity to make changes so that you don't need to continue a decline. What I see from a lot of people is when their physician says, oh, you have stage 3, don't worry about it. You don't need to make any changes right now. What they're saying is, come back to me when you're stage 5, and then we're going to panic. And then we're going to be freaking out about potassium and phosphorus and protein and sodium. And we're going to be throwing all this stuff at you. But like, why do we have to wait for that? Why do we have to wait for things to get bad? Why can't we take care of things where they're at now, so that we don't have to get to that point? It would be like somebody who has high blood sugars and their A1C starts trending up and it's like, it's okay. We'll wait until it hits 8%. We'll wait until it hits 9%. And then we'll figure it out. Like, no, we can do something now. We can make changes now. And so that's what you probably hear it. Like, I can feel my anxiety like building because I get so like driven by this, that I just want people to know that there is 100%. There's always something that could be done in these early stages. Even if your doctor is saying there's nothing that can be done, it's not true. It's very not true.
I don't think it's anxiety. That's not how I was coming across anyway. It's passion. And I think passion, like for being not really necessarily preventative, but preventing it from getting worse, and I think that that's admirable. And I think that people should be listening to professionals, because you're right. And from what I understand, a lot of doctors have very limited nutrition education, and that's just not something that is emphasized, whereas you've dedicated your life to nutrition. So you touched on things like protein, potassium, sodium, magnesium, phosphorus. What does an ideal diet look like for someone who's in the early stages of CKD?
Well, it's going to sound really boring, but honestly, like a very balanced diet. And what I mean by that is, we don't need to do any crazy fads. We don't need to do any crazy supplements or anything like that, but including fruits and vegetables, which if anyone is listening and they've been looking at a renal diet, there might be a lot of things that I say that you're going to feel like are a gut punch, because you're going to be like, no, I was told the exact opposite. But I'm telling you, the renal diet guidelines have changed drastically in the past several years. And not everybody, especially not practitioners who are like so focused on kidney disease. Like that's all I do day in and day out. I'm totally 100% in this. So I'm telling you, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, being careful with animal protein. Like, yes, it can be enjoyed and included, but probably not as much, especially as like a typical American diet would include it. So that would probably be like one of the bigger changes that I know a lot of people struggle with, is making some modifications with their protein, but getting more beans in, getting more legumes in. These other plant protein sources are basically what is important to incorporate over those animal proteins. And I will say, one of the things I love about Cronometer is I go back and forth between Cronometer.
No, you nailed it.
Cronometer.
You know what? Regardless how you say it, you nailed it. So
Okay,
I say Cronometer, but some people say Cronometer. It's everywhere. Okay. You're good.
Great. One of the things that I absolutely love, and I tell my students and my patients, like, that you have the prowl value on there, which is not something that the general public knows about. But this is such a powerful tool. Like, I wrote a whole blog article to talk about what PRAL is, talk about the calculation. I put a PRAL calculator. I embedded a PRAL calculator into my blog so people could like play around with it. It's something I use to teach my students, my nutrition students. I teach them about PRAL and I show them like what a different, like a nutrition prescription would look like for different people and what that would do for PRAL. But I really love that PRAL is included because it gives such a good visual of what can happen with the kidneys. Because kind of going back to the very beginning of our conversation, one of the things that the kidneys does is it helps with pH balance. So it helps with the acidity in our blood. And with chronic kidney disease, it's not able to do that. So the acidity increases, it rises. Now, a traditional or a standard American diet is high on protein, and most people are not getting enough potassium. And those are two of the values that are used to calculate PRAL. So if we were to follow a standard American diet, it's going to be highly acidic, AKA a positive PRAL value. Now, when I talk with kidney patients about improving their PRAL, we go to a moderate protein diet, not necessarily low, although low protein diet can have a place for kidney patients, but it's not the first option in my perspective. But we can do a more moderate protein and more potassium because historically kidney patients are told to not have potassium. And this is where we're flipping the script to say, no, if we increase potassium, then we can reduce that PRAL. We can make it more alkaline. But the old renal diet dropped potassium, which kept that PRAL very acidic. I know this is like a lot of like kind of sciencey stuff. I try not to get too heavy into it, but it is a really, really important tool. And 100%, one of the things I immediately go to for my patients in their food logs, I'm looking at their PRAL. And once they start to recognize that and they play around with setting up their days, they're even planning meals ahead of time and they look at their PRAL and they're like, oh my gosh, like one of my patients, he was afraid of potassium and I showed him his PRAL that was like kind of around a neutral area. We added a baked potato, which he hasn't had for years. He's like, I didn't think I could have that. We added a baked potato to his day and his PRAL went to like -30. It was a significant change. And he was just so floored by how adding this one food would make such a difference. Not even dropping the protein, but just adding more of that potassium in, it made such a big difference. And so that's one of my favorite things. And that's a big part of the renal diet that I teach is just shifting these nutrients to be more kidney supportive.
I now, because I track my nutrition every day, I'm going to live look at my report and I'm going to tell you what it was. And you can tell me how bad this is.
Oh my gosh.
Let me see. Should I go to a day that I feel like I ate well? Let's see what my PRAL is. Mine's not listed.
So it might be under the settings. And that's something that I've taught people too, is you have to go under the settings into those nutrition scales. It's not inherently selected. And so you have to go in and select the PRAL to be visible, and then you'll be able to see it. But yeah, it's not automatically included.
This is also helpful. I'm gonna have to look because now I'm genuinely curious. Does it show up as the PRAL? Like it says PRAL, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wonder if it is on the mobile version.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, well, great.
It is.
And I do have a bunch at the bottom, a bunch of different nutrient balances, but I don't see PRAL. I do have a potassium sodium one.
That is another one that I use with clients too, because again, sometimes people focus, especially with kidney disease, they focus on so low sodium, but they don't focus on more potassium. And so it's still kind of like, it doesn't support their overall goals because they're still not getting more of the nutrients they need.
I feel like I should 100% know this. But you know what? This is good because this is obviously not something I look at in the app. And that this podcast is going to change that for me.
Yeah, I have several Cronometer accounts. So I have a test one, and then I have like my own, and then I have one for my team. And yeah, I have quite a few. I know it's under this.
Jen Hernandez, onboarding community marketing manager, Eliisa.
I kid you not. I do teach a class for people on how they can customize their the renal side of their Cronometer.
I think that's amazing. I'll come back to this another time.
Yeah. Well, when you do see it, you can go to my blog at Plant Powered Kidneys.
I will.
PlantPoweredKidneys.com/PRAL, PRAL. And I go through and I talk about the whole equation so you can see like the different numbers, because I don't think Cronometer like dives into like all of the individual pieces. It just gives that prowl total.
I think so.
But yeah, it is really, really incredible when you just make, I mean, it's a math equation. You make one tweak to one variable and it changes the whole outcome.
A baked potato. Why is animal protein different when it comes to kidney health than plant-based protein?
So officially the recommendations say that there's not one protein. There's not enough evidence to say one protein is better than the other. From my experience and what I've seen with students, I don't necessarily pull out animal protein entirely unless they've already made that choice for one reason or another. But nutritionally, again, this goes back to prowl, because if we put in the nutrition information of 4 ounces of chicken versus the nutrition information of half a cup of garbanzo beans or chickpeas, the chickpeas have the potassium and the magnesium, and those are 2 of the prowl reducing, those acidity reducing numbers. And the chicken doesn't have as much potassium or like magnesium. It doesn't have those nutrients that lower it, but it does have more protein and phosphorus, which increases the acidity. So just looking at the prowl alone, that makes a really big difference. And so that's one of the reasons I recommend that students look to make some swaps from animal to plant proteins, because they're literally adjusting this alkalinity scale just based on their protein choice.
Interesting. And it's because the other nutrients that it has, which I didn't really consider, but that's really fascinating. Do you think, in your perspective, that a plant-based diet do have plant-powered kidneys? Do you think that that's a better choice for kidney health?
Well, I mean, like I've told people before, like there's a reason I didn't call us vegan powered kidneys or vegan kidneys. The whole concept came from the very original thought of more plants should be included in a renal diet because they historically weren't. And so I find that I've had people have success improving their kidney function, improving their numbers without going fully plant-based. It's very much possible. It comes down to having enough nutrients. So for example, a lot of kidney patients aren't eating enough calories. They're not getting enough energy to begin with. And so we work on getting enough calories, and from there, making sure that they're getting enough energy with those nutrients that are supporting their health too. So when I look at these different types of diets, my ultimate goal is let's look at what plants you're getting in and how can we get in like just 1 or 2 more. It doesn't even have to be that crazy or that dramatic. I know some people, like especially because kidney disease, it's more common in the older population, and the older population right now comes from a meat and potato diet. And like that's what, people grew up with. And so I don't want to challenge anyone from their familial history. There's a reason there's a whole category called comfort food. Like food has a lot of very strong emotional ties for us. And so when I approach it with somebody, I'm not saying I want to demolish your family history. I don't want you to take your grandma's recipe and tear it up and throw it away. Like I want to find a way that you can still enjoy this, but that you don't feel guilt. You don't feel stress. You don't feel scared of your labs, or you don't feel scared thinking it's going to trigger kidney failure, which by the way, there's no such thing as one meal causing kidney failure. The only food that's totally off limit for kidney patients is star fruit. That has a neurotoxin. This is like a total aside, but yeah, star fruit has a neurotoxin. With kidney failure, kidney disease, you can't eliminate well, and that can cause kidney failure. So star fruit is the only absolute no, but everything else is totally negotiable. So again, if you have like your grandma's favorite, like beef stroganoff recipe, like we need to find a way to include that. It might be some ingredient changes. There might be some modifications, but I'd much rather find a way where you can eat that and enjoy that and feel connected to your grandma, but also not at the sacrifice of your own mental health and your own sanity around taking care of your kidneys. Because with CKD, I know it can totally take over your life. It's just all you think about once you hear that your kidneys are like a ticking time bomb.
And food is meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy that it's star fruit because as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't really taste like anything. It's pretty, great garnish, but really for me, it doesn't have a lot of flavor. But I did a nutrition course through Stanford this year. And one of the things they do these case studies at the end. So you learn, whatever, and then you have to advise a fictitious character. And a lot of the stuff that we had learned about had less to do with the nutrients, although there was a ton of that as well. But it was about like how to navigate social situations and how to make a diet sustainable. And so I really love that while you have an emphasis, obviously, that like plant-based diets, have less of phosphorus, like you said, which can cause issues. It's great that you're still like, people should do obviously what they enjoy as well. And I think that's, for me, if I was looking for a dietitian, I would want someone that understands that there are traditions and preferences that go into diet. It's not just about nutrition, because if it was, we would all hit 100% in our targets of Cronometer every single day. But we have, like I often talk about how much I love mini eggs, and I allow myself to have those now because it's part of what makes me happy. So
yeah, I have a drawer in my refrigerator dedicated to mini Reese's peanut butter cups. Like that just has to be something. But my husband's learned and he keeps it stocked for me.
Wow, what a good man. Those
Yes.
are also really, really delicious. I actually recently modified my cookie recipe and I crushed those up like with the flat of a knife, and it swapped those in instead of chocolate chips, and it was a hit. It was a big hit.
I would imagine it.
Yeah. I mean, peanut butter, chocolate, it's all a win. I have a couple questions that I've heard circulating the internet that I would like to either you give me the nod yes or debunk. Energy drinks and kidneys. I heard this story, and this is like through a friend of a friend, that somebody was admitted to Emerge and they found out that they had like 30% kidney function or something like that. And they tracked it down to a particular energy drink. And then when they stopped having that, their kidney function returned. That's a total myth.
You know what? I haven't heard anything like that. I'm not going to say it's not possible, because obviously, like if it happened, but I have not heard anything of a specific drink like that. Again, unless maybe it was like starfruit flavored, which like Starbucks had a starfruit flavored drink that I had to like go out and tell people like, no, stop.
avoid.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Without knowing anything else about like their story, it could be related to just their hydration alone.
Okay.
And maybe they were drinking these energy drinks and not staying well hydrated otherwise, like not drinking enough water. And also, like, this is going to be kind of a jump, but if they're like, my husband loves energy drinks and like, it's a thing for him, like from his military days and, working out. And like, that's kind of this whole thing. And so there is a possibility of like really like working out really heavily. Cause I know a lot of people use energy drinks as like a pre-workout. Yes. And so if they're working out really hard, like super high intensity for like chronically, that can lead to rhabdomyolysis, breakdown of muscle, and that can lead to acute kidney injury. But again, like that's kind of like a really big jumping off point, like only knowing about the energy drinks. I'm just trying to think of like, there's so many other things that could be going on. And yeah, it could be something related to a certain ingredient maybe that was in there, but nothing jumps out from like the top of my brain that would be like, oh, for sure, that must have been it.
Okay, good. I don't prefer energy drinks, actually. I don't really like the taste. But when I heard that, I was like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Like maybe energy drinks do impair kidney function. So I'm glad that we kind of sorted that. Alcohol. Give me your hot take on alcohol and kidney health.
Well, alcohol is never something that's like encouraged, even though there's some people, you talk about like antioxidants in red wine and things like that. Like, the benefits are not solely exclusive to red wine. For example, like resveratrol, you can get from other sources like grapes. Like there are other ways that you can get it. It doesn't have to be alcohol. That being said, I have had plenty of patients. Like one of my people who went from stage 5 to stage 4, she wanted to add a little bit of wine back into her plan, like back into her routine. And when I say routine, I don't mean like every night she's having a glass of wine. I mean like once a week when they go out with friends, she's enjoying a glass of wine in the social company, in the social atmosphere. And also, I will add that her doctor did give her the green light too. So she did have that approval medically, because one of the things is that kidney patients can be on dozens of prescription medications to handle so many of the different functions that are going on. And so alcohol is very commonly a disruptor for medications. So you really want to make sure you get it approved by your doctor for you to be on medication. Or if you get a new prescription, ask if it will have any interference, like if alcohol will make a difference with that, because that can be a really big deal. But if I have somebody who's like, you know what, like New Year's Eve is going to happen and I want to have that glass of champagne at midnight, like that's not going to cause kidney damage, kidney failure. Like it is literally a drop in the bucket.
Okay. That's good to know too. What is it about alcohol that does over time impact the kidneys?
So if it's excessive alcohol, it can lead to quite a number of things. But for one, it can be dehydrating because it will increase the diuretic effect of the body to help eliminate. It takes over our metabolism, in which our body cannot be working and taking care of the other nutrients we're supposed to be taking care of. And beyond that, we typically make less than ideal choices when we've had more to drink. We are not,
What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean
Everybody
taquitos at 7-Eleven?
Yeah, everybody knows. So yeah, there's quite a few things related to just overindulging. And then of course, alcohol does increase problems with blood sugar. It increases our blood pressure. And again, this is all coming from chronic consumption of alcohol. If you have it occasionally for a social, and 1 drink per day for women, 2 drinks per day for men is the recommendation here in the US, but that's even so like still kind of the cap. So I don't typically have patients who drink much, if at all. Usually people, when they have kidney problems, they're like, you know what, let me cut this factor out entirely. This is totally modifiable and something I have control over. I'm just not going to do that. So that's usually what I see.
That's awesome that people are willing to just, go cold turkey on something that they know is detrimental to their kidney health. If you could have an ideal diet for somebody, I don't really want particular food suggestions per se, as opposed to like, if someone has impaired kidney function, how much sodium do you want them to have a day? How much potassium? How much water? Like what kind of recommendations would be like best case scenario for you?
So for sodium, that's usually a pretty low-hanging fruit, I would say. The American Heart Association recommends like under 2,300. The National Kidney Foundation recommends under 2,300 milligrams per day. In some cases, it might be a little bit lower, down to like 1,500 milligrams per day for sodium. For some people, this can be very, very easy. And if anything, a lot of my clients that make their meals at home and eat food based out of their house, they don't even hit those numbers. And so they have flexibility to season, to salt their food as they like, because they have that much control over the foods that they're enjoying. Now, for somebody who's going out, multiple times a week, that can be very difficult to bring down that sodium, because we know sodium is one of the top problems when it comes to like dining out. It's just very, very easy to hit a sodium goal in one meal. For like the whole day, you can hit that in one meal. So there might be things that we just start kind of looking at, like some lower sodium options. But yeah, for sodium, usually starting at under 2,300, like 2,300 or less is the goal for sodium. Now, potassium is really nuanced because the kidneys are able to manage potassium. And then in later stages, there may be some difficulty in managing potassium. However, newer research is starting to say the dietary potassium isn't related to our blood potassium, which kidney patients who look at their labs, blood potassium is a very common thing to look at. But I'm telling you that they're not tied together. And one of the things that I quite often, my baked potato client was somebody who had a past high level of high potassium, but it happened one lab draw like 5 years ago. There was no reason for him medically, nutritionally, there was no reason for him not to be having more potassium in his diet now. So it's important to have that conversation with your doctor. But again, the doctors aren't the nutrition experts. And I have heard doctors give these blanket dietary guidelines to kidney patients because like nephrologists, the kidney specialists, like 90% or so, like a big chunk of their patient panel are dialysis patients. Right. And dialysis patients are the ones to be really careful with potassium. But CKD the risk of a high potassium for a early stage CKD patient is incredibly low because there's enough kidney function to manage it. There's enough going on. And so I don't recommend a lower potassium diet for people unless it is medically specifically indicated that they should be, and usually confirmed by a dietitian, like beyond the doctor. Usually they need that extra confirmation from a nutrition expert. So that would be another one that I would look at. Protein, we do try to make sure that we're looking at enough protein. So the standard guideline, 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is where I start with people. The guidelines, the kidney guidelines do sometimes recommend a little bit lower, but anytime we go lower, there's a risk of malnutrition. And so it's incredibly important to do that under medical care so that you don't cause more problems. It's like whack-a-mole. Like you don't want to hit one down for two others to pop up. So if you're trying to go lower, it's really important that your team is monitoring you and that you're not, if you're losing weight, like you're not getting enough protein, that's really not good for your kidneys or your overall health. So protein is something that you want to be focusing on. And again, I look at quality over the quantity problem. I'm looking at more plants, just integrating more plant proteins than animals and not cutting down on the grams of protein per day. And then prowl, that's something that I give patients goals and I'll have them track their labs. And then I see what their Cronometer record is telling me. And then I say, okay, your prowl right now is around +2. Let's see if we can get it down to a -5. And let's see if we can make that consistent. And one of the things I love, I know we weren't going to do this podcast to like toot Cronometers for him, but really, honestly, I do love that, like the reports, I print my reports for my patients with each of our sessions to give them like a big picture overview of like, this is what's been going on for you for the last 4 weeks. And it gives those averages, which I also really love. And we talk about, again, how it's not just one meal, it's the big picture. What is your body on average getting? Because that's what your labs are going to be showing over time. Those are some of the nutrients that I focus on specifically with Cronometer.
Yeah, I love the nutrition report. I think the big picture has gone so far for me because, like I said, I've tracked my nutrition every day for years. Like we're talking almost 7 years I've been here and I've tracked my nutrition the whole time. And sometimes you think that your day-to-day choices really impact you. And then you take a step back. Oftentimes I do that with the nutrition report. If I've had a day where I've had like 4,000 calories, because I can put away 4,000 calories with ease, let me tell you. But when you zoom out, it has very little impact, if any at all, on like even a month, let alone a year. So it's awesome that you're encouraging people to do that as well. What is your take on hydration? I've seen you sipping presumably water often.
Oh yeah, it's my water. I always need
Amazing.
it. So usually, again, in like the earlier stages, we don't need to worry about a fluid restriction because what happens in later stages, the kidneys aren't able to eliminate as much fluid. So in some cases, later stages, your doctor might give you a fluid restriction. But in the earlier stages, we are aiming for, and I usually use like the body size, usually about half of their weight in ounces. So let's say 150 pounds divided by 2 is 75. I would say 75 ounces of fluids, not just water, but fluids per day. And again, a great thing about Cronometer is that it's showing them the water from their foods that they're also getting, because that's another great example that they don't have to drink a gallon of water for the day. They can still eat hydrating foods and help reach their fluid goals. So yeah, I usually do that. And then unless in the later stages, we might talk about a fluid restriction. And then I set a target to say, okay, this is what you want to hit. And then max, whatever ounces for that individual in those specific cases.
That's amazing. I also love being able to see the water we get from food. It's very educating. And obviously, like plants tend to have a lot. So that really helped me hone in on my hydration. Okay, I have 2 more questions. We've gone so over, but I have loved this, Jen. This has been so fascinating to me because I feel like I, have a small bit of understanding now. And when I see reviews or users come through and say that they're managing their CKD with Cronometer, I'm going to be like, I got a podcast for you.
Oh, that's great.
The question I always ask everybody at the end of the podcast is if our listeners could action one piece of advice from you only at the end of this, what one piece of advice would you give our listeners that would change their health?
I always ask somebody when they are setting goals anytime I have a client, we always set a goal at the end. And I always ask them, how doable is this for you? And if there's any hesitation, and there is kind of this like elevated when you start thinking about the stuff you want to do and you get really pumped up and you're like, I'm going to do 10,000 steps a day. And then we look back and say, oh, like, this is one of my clients who was like, I really want to hit that. But we look at how realistic is this for you? And we see in her log, she was hitting like 2,000 steps a day. And while 10,000 can be a good goal, is that going to be something that's feasible? Basically, I talk with people to say, I want you to hit your goal. What kind of goal can we set that you 100% will hit? And so we set the goal for her. In this case, she set a goal of 2,500 steps per day. And she's nailing it. She had back surgery and was still nailing this goal.
I love that.
That's my encouragement, is I know, people can listen to this, people can go through and see like this inspiration and feel this like drive to change everything and to like just go from like 0 to 60. And it's like, no, like that's not sustainable. And I know it sounds really cool. And like, yes, you can get there. But like right now, let's think of what's realistic. Think about what's going on in your life. Think about the challenges and the things that come up, back surgery, probably not a more common thing, but still think about the things that are going to impede this goal. And what kind of goal would you be able to accomplish even when that stuff happens? So it could be, instead of going totally vegan, it's just, okay, from now on, I will have a plant-based breakfast, which basically means for most people finding a substitution for eggs and maybe like doing tofu or something like that instead. And like the rest of the meals, they can carry on, whatever. But breakfast, that's my low-hanging fruit. That's one that I have more time to take care of or whatever it is. Like, I guess that's just really what I want to say is like, think about your goal in that really realistic perspective that it's something that's getting you towards the bigger picture and it's not going to totally gut you to accomplish.
I love that advice so much. I see, like I'm entrenched in this nutrition and health space because of my job. And then outside of that, I see people in my life that are making goals. And sometimes I feel like a little bit of a wet blanket because I'm like, is this sustainable? Like I've seen people go on really restrictive diets. And for me, and this has taken me years to figure out. Like I used to be in that same camp, but for me, it's like, if you can't do this long-term forever, then maybe don't do it at all because you're probably going to end up like reverting back. And there are some like elimination diets and stuff that obviously people need to do to find out food intolerances and sensitivities and that kind of thing. And I'm not talking about that, but if someone completely does a 180 and then changes everything, like it's not going to be easy to adhere to. And I think that it might feel like less exciting, like you said, to be like, what can I actually achieve when we want to make a difference? We want to make it now and we want to make it fast and big, but to actually like step back and determine what is realistic. Because it is really empowering. Like I imagine for your client that increased her goal and is hitting it, the satisfaction of nailing that is really powerful. And then baby steps from there, like she's crushing the 2,500, maybe she increases or maybe, she leaves it where it is. But a lot of people want to, I think, run before they walk. And so I think that your advice is incredible. I've loved this every second. You're wonderful. I'm so stoked you're part of our community. And I really hope that this is a relationship that we get to continue to foster and work with you, because the way you speak, the way that you explain, I feel like you're just wonderful, Jen. You're honestly wonderful. I'm sure everyone who's listening is going to feel that and they're going to want to work with you or follow you on social media. So where can people find you? I'm going to drop any links for your social handles or obviously your website in the show notes. But if you could tell those listening where you're really active and where they can find you, that'd be great.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Eliisa. That's so sweet of you. And I really appreciate it. The main hub for us is our website at plantpoweredkidneys.com. And from there, you can find tons of our free resources. We have classes. You can learn more about working with us. We have a ton of information there. That's our main hub. Now, for social media, you can find us on Instagram at Plant Powered Kidneys. You can find us on Facebook also at Plant Powered Kidneys. And then on Facebook, we also have a private Facebook group. So if you're looking to connect with like-minded people that are positive and uplifting and supportive. And that's something I think it can be kind of difficult to find these days, especially on social media, unfortunately. But we are a good supportive group there. And I myself am in there almost every day through Monday through Friday, checking in and answering questions. So I'm there to support as well. Those are, I would say, probably the biggest ones off the top of my head that I would love you all to learn more about.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to, who doesn't want a safe place on the internet to discuss kidney health? Right. Everybody. All right. Well, it's been a pure pleasure, Jen. Thanks so much for being here and really appreciate you taking the time to educate our listeners and me.
Thank you so much, Eliisa. I loved our talk too. So let's please stay in touch.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Discovering Nutrition with Cronometer. I hope you found this conversation with Jen Hernandez just as fascinating as I did. Kidney health is something many of us don't think about until there's a problem, but as Jen explained, small, intentional changes in our diet can make a huge impact. If you want to learn more, be sure to check out Plant Powered Kidneys for even more resources on kidney health and nutrition. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone else who might find it helpful. See you next time.